Well, good morning and welcome all you brave people who manage the frigid temperatures this morning. I read about a retired Presbyterian pastor named John Buchanan, and he tells of baptizing a young 2-year-old boy. And after the child had been baptized, Pastor Buchanan, following the directions of the Presbyterian prayer book, put his hand on the little fellow's head and said, "You are a child of God, sealed by the Spirit in your baptism, and you belong to Jesus Christ forever." Unexpectedly, the little boy looked up and responded, "Uh-oh." Well, the people of the congregation smiled, but I think if they'd been Episcopalians, they would have laughed out loud. But clearly, this little guy had just had an aha moment. He now belonged to Jesus Christ forever. Have you ever had an aha moment? You know, one of those moments in life when you come to some great realization or understanding. In our culture, it's become popular to use the word epiphany. You know, I just had an epiphany, referring to some great revelation that one has had. Sometimes we call these moments God moments, a time when something is made so clear to us that it could only have been God's doing. I heard a wonderful story from days gone by about a young man who was dating a very attractive young girl. One Sunday after church, and this was in the days when everybody went to church, the two went for a picnic. The young man had made arrangements to rent a rowboat, and his plan was to row to a small island on their favorite lake and enjoy a lunch that he had prepared himself. Now, since he hadn't done this very often before, he forgot a couple of things, and his attractive friend said, "You know, it might be nice if we had some salt and ketchup and napkins." So without hesitation, the young man got into the boat and rowed back to the store and got these items. Well, this routine occurred twice more during that afternoon. He rowed back to the store and got more things that she had requested. Now, it was pretty hot on this particular day, and by the time he had completed all these rowing chores, he had perspired so much that his good suit was soaked. You see, that was back in the day when they wore suits to do things like that. But he realized something that afternoon. He realized that there had to be a better way. The young man's name, by the way, was Clarence Evinrude. Later that same evening, he designed the very first outboard motor, and an industry was born. And later, that attractive young lady became his wife. Now, there's no further word about how many times he was sent to the store after that, but clearly he learned the secret to a happy marriage, to embrace those two words, "Yes, dear." But we call what Clarence Evinrude's experience was an aha moment, an epiphany moment, if you will, a moment of life-changing realization. Let me tell you another story, a story about little Benny. Now, little Benny was an African-American boy who grew up in a single-parent home. Benny's mom, Sonia, had been raised in a foster home and was married when she was 13 years old. After getting married, Sonia discovered that her husband, a Baptist preacher, was already married and had 5 children. So much for having a life partner. Now, what was she to do? She had, by this time, had 2 little boys to raise. Well, I'll tell you what she did. She worked 2 and sometimes 3 jobs in order to support her children. Now, not too surprisingly, little Benny fell behind in school, eventually falling to the bottom of his class. In fact, it wasn't until he got into junior high that Benny was convinced, it wasn't until then that he was convinced he was stupid. His nickname was Dummy. But Sonia didn't give up on her little boy. She required him to read 2 books a week and write reports. Little Benny didn't realize it at the time, but his mother could barely read herself. But Sonia's disability didn't stop her from supporting her son. and she also limited his television watching. Soon, Benny amazed his teachers and fellow students. He would later say, "It was at that moment that I realized that I wasn't stupid." Within a year, Benny was at the top of his class. After this epiphany in junior high school, Benny went on to acquire scholarships and attended Yale and then the University of Michigan Medical School. And at the age of 32, Dr. Benny became the youngest surgeon in the nation to hold the position of Director of Pediatric Neurosurgery. And then, in 2016, Dr. Benjamin Carson ran for the presidency of the United States. You see, both Clarence Evinrude and Dr. Ben Carson had aha moments. Evinrude saw the need for a motor to power a rowboat, and Dr. Carson learned that he wasn't a dummy. This is the first Sunday in the church season of Epiphany, the first Sunday after the Epiphany. And this should be a time for us for new understandings and new beginnings, new ideas about what it means to be a follower of Christ. Aha moments are not unusual in human lives, are they? We often ask people who have had significant achievements, when was the first time that you realized? For example, a TV reporter might ask the coach, when was the first time you realized you'd won the game? Or for the stranded hiker, when was the first time you realized you were lost? Or in a different setting, when was the first time you realized that your life was empty and without meaning? Or when was the first time that you realized your marriage was in trouble? The moment of realization, the aha moment, the time of epiphany, and what a powerful time it is. One morning in 1888, Alfred Nobel, the inventor of dynamite, the man who had spent his entire life amassing a fortune from the manufacture and sale of weapons of destruction, awoke to his own obituary. Now, the obituary was a result of a simple journalistic error. You see, Alfred's brother had actually died, and a French reporter carelessly reported the death of the wrong brother. Alfred Nobel was shocked by what the newspaper had to say about him. For the first time, he saw himself as the world saw him, the dynamite king, the one who made an immense fortune from explosives. And as far as the public was concerned, that was the entire purpose of his life. None of his true ideals had been recognized. He was quite simply a merchant of death, and he would be remembered for that. Nobel resolved to make clear to the world the true meaning and purpose of his life, and this would be done through the final disposition of his fortune. His last will and testament would be an expression of his life's ideals. The result was the Nobel Prize, given to those who have done the most work for peace in the world. What a dramatic breakthrough realization that was. In today's gospel, we hear that Jesus goes to his cousin, John the Baptist, to be baptized. And we hear John say, "I need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me?" Clearly, John knows who Jesus is, and Jesus replies, "Let it be so now, for it is proper for us in this way to fulfill all righteousness." Then, when Jesus comes up out of the River Jordan, suddenly the heavens were opened to him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased." Now that's an aha moment if there ever was one. It was an epiphany, if not for Jesus, certainly for those who watched it. So let me ask you about epiphanies in your lives. For example, when was the first time you realized the majesty of God? Was it the beauty and grandeur of creation that evoked that realization? Anyone who is sensitive at all to the beauty of nature can see God daily. When was it that you first realized the majesty of God? Maybe it was the birth of your first child. I know that was the case for me. What greater miracle in all creation than the birth of a new human being? When we see that child learn to walk and talk and finally grow into a mature person, we're led to that dramatic realization that there's more to life than just physics and chemistry. Behind creation, there stands a creator. When was it that you first realized the majesty of God? And when was it that you first realized your own inadequacy? Inadequacy to deal with life's critical issues. You know, if we're honest with ourselves, we know that we are all inadequate in one way or another. We just can't do it on our own. Now, as a golfer, I am what you might call an equipment junkie. You see, I am absolutely certain that that new putter or driver is going to take 10 strokes off my game. Dick Emmons wrote a humorous but somewhat plaintive little poem that was published in the Golf Digest some years ago, and it went like this. I bought a set of brand new clubs and rushed out to the tee. The brand new clubs are really great, but I'm the same old me. I'm the same old me. Each of us could sing that sad refrain, couldn't we? You know, we have a world of good intentions, but somehow very little ever changes. It's not that we don't want to do better, but there's some vital element missing. When was it that you first realized your own inadequacy? Maybe it was a time of great crisis or disappointment. Those times happen to all of us, don't they? When was it that you first realized your own inadequacy? Maybe it was a time when someone you loved lay critically ill. Remember all the promises you'd made, all the good things you said you would do? If only God would intervene. Between a rock and a hard place, we might call it. We've all been there. And a cry comes from our lips. Oh, God. And lastly, let me ask you, when was it that you first realized that you were God's own child? Not in the way that Jesus heard the voice saying that you are my son. His relationship with God was unique. He was the Son of God. And yet he taught us to pray, Our Father. You see, I too am a son of the King, and so are you, children of the King, as well. C.S. Lewis, the great British writer and theologian, was fearful early on to the giving in to the demands of God. But finally, there came that moment of realization, that epiphany. He writes, "That which I greatly feared had at last come upon me." In the Trinity term of 1929, I gave in and admitted that God was God and knelt and prayed. C.S. Lewis, who has influenced so many people around the world with his writings about God, came reluctantly to God, and the world has been greatly blessed that he did. When was it that you first realized the majesty of God? When was it that you first realized your own personal inadequacy? And when was it that you first realized that you were a child of God? Let us pray. Lord, you are God, and I need you. I can't make it on my own. I need for you to change my heart, change my priorities, my reason for living. Help me bear the image of your Son, in whose name I pray. Amen.